Hey everyone, this is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. What I want to talk about today was inspired by my friend, Dr. Rachel Edoho-Eket, who I'm so honored. She wrote the foreword to Forward together, and she did such a great job setting the table for what the book was going to bring to life. And I was inspired by a recent clip that she shared on Instagram of her, a snippet of her ISTE speech, which I found was really compelling. And she talks about the importance of student strengths. And in Innovator's Mindset, one of the chapters is focused solely on the idea of strengths-based leadership. And I was reminded of this quote when I was listening to Dr. Rachel: "Success is achieved by developing our strengths, not by eliminating our weaknesses." This does not mean that you don't develop weaknesses through the process, but when you start with strengths, it ensures that people really feel valued. And this is something paramount to do with students, but also the adults. But before I get into any of that, I just want to share what she talked about in her recent clip.
Education isn't just about helping students succeed in school. It's about helping them see themselves differently. Because when students understand their strengths, they find their voice. And when they find their voice, they discover their agency. And when students have agency, they can change the world around them.
That is so true, and I think it is so important what she is focusing on. And do we do that in our classrooms? Do we just focus on what kids are struggling with and sometimes even hammer them in classrooms for not being better at the things that we want them to be? Or do we start with strengths? And as I was mentioning earlier, this is something that is really important to do at the adult level. It is something I've been writing about for years. And in Innovator's Mindset, I actually share a story about Ontario education in this chapter regarding this. And basically, just kind of sharing it from memory instead of reading the clip from the book. I really highly encourage you to check out the book if you haven't already, because really mirroring that, this is not just about students, but we have to start with adults. If you don't focus on the strengths of the adults, it's really hard to get the adults to focus on the strengths of the kids, because they tend to trickle down what is happening to them. And so in Ontario education, basically, Ontario, Canada, I pulled up this article, and it was basically titled this: "Literacy rates up, but students still struggling with math." So in this article, and it was so evident of how a lot of times people perceive education, they constantly talked about the PISA scores in Ontario, Canada, and how students were not just measuring up to where they needed to be in math. Now, the literacy scores were up, but you wouldn't know that from the article, because all they talked about was the math. How basically, education sucks at math, sucks at math, sucks at math, sucks at math. So what happens with this process is basically each district kind of feels this pressure, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, our math scores are down, we need to focus on this. So then, the directors of education, superintendents in other areas, then, put in their strategic plans how we need to improve math. Then they feel that pressure from at the school level, the principals start implementing that as well. And basically all we hear is we need to, basically fix our math. And it's kind of like a game of educational whack-a-mole. You start to focus on one problem, and then another problem will arise at some point. So basically, you hear from the news, then you hear from the director or superintendent of education, then you hear from your principal, we suck at math. The thing that was interesting, as I mentioned earlier, in the article, literacy was not mentioned at all, even though the literacy scores were up. So what I argue in the Innovator's Mindset, I think this really is paramount, and building on to Rachel's idea, is the first thing people should have said: why are we so good at literacy? What are we doing there? We're just really excelling in this area of literacy. And then asking the question, are there things that we are doing in literacy that we could also be doing in math that might improve? That's a component of that. But if you're just constantly beaten down that you're doing this wrong, you're not fixing this, I promise you, they might fix the math problem within 3 to 5 years, and then a new problem is going to come out. And then we're asking, why are people so frustrated with being in education? we always want to focus on the strengths of our students, but do we do that through focusing on the strengths of the adults that we serve? And I've written about this extensively for Together. I also talked about how that is one of the really essential things to start with people's strengths, because people, they don't want to just hear their value, they need to feel valued. And I talk about how we basically made staff professional learning around this idea of what are people really good at, and then having them lead, as opposed to, hey, you're not good at this, you need to go in this area. And we wanted people to see not only themselves as experts, but people across the hall as experts as well. That is so crucial to this work. And in Innovate Outside the Box, building on Dr. Rachel Edoho-Eket's idea of really focusing on student strengths, I actually share this idea of 5 questions to ask your students to start the school year. These are the questions, and I encourage people to use this as they wish and modify, add, subtract, do whatever you want with this. But there's a reason why I'm sharing this with you all. And here are the 5 questions. What are the qualities you look for in a teacher? What are you passionate about? What is one big question you have this year? What are your strengths and how can we utilize them? And what does success at the end of the year look like? You're really trying to understand who the student is, what they're excited about, what they feel that they're really good at. What I caution to people when I share this with them, do not use this as an icebreaker activity. It's not an activity where you just get the answers. It's share with your partner and then move on. This is a research-based activity, because once you start knowing this stuff, once you start leveraging this stuff, it really can actually help you. I'll give you an example. Anyone who knows me, I love basketball. I'm obsessed with basketball. If you asked me these questions when I was basically grade 4 and up, I would have thrown basketball into every answer possible. What would that have told you? Immediately, if you want him reading more, get him basketball books, because he'll read basketball books. He'll do this. And this is the thing that I've challenged with groups. I hated reading so much as a kid because I was asked to read books that I didn't really have interest in. So I was just turned off of reading, as a whole. But if you had me reading basketball books and I started to enjoy what I was reading, then I might read stuff that I might not be interested in, which ultimately develops your weaknesses. There's a lot of research on this that and I share this in Innovator's Mindset, Tom Rath talks about the idea of when you focus on what people are not good at, yeah, they improve slightly. If you don't focus on anything, there's no improvement, obviously. But when you focus on strengths, that actually elevates, and it actually develops weaknesses through the process, because it helps develop confidence, which ultimately helps develop competence. No one ever, and I think Dr. Rachel does a really great job at this, no one ever becomes innovative in an area that they hate. You have to start with what their strengths are, which will ultimately also help build their weaknesses. If you focus on weaknesses solely and what people are not good at, then they start to check out, and that's where they disconnect. And so then tying that activity where you could do this with students, somebody once shared with me, and I thought it was such a good idea, you could actually take those exact same questions and then you could use them with staff. Why wouldn't you use the staff? And it was a really good reminder for me that if you're kind of going through the process of hey, you're not only using this to leverage and understand what your staff is really excited about, what they want to, and again, add, modify, subtract, do whatever you need to do with these questions for the staff level. But once they experience this and then we leverage it, then they experience how we leverage strengths, and then it's more likely to happen in the classroom with the same thing. You're trying to recreate the experience that you're hoping as a leader in a classroom. So I love what Rachel said. I'm sure that because I know her work, and I will tell you this about Rachel, the amount of energy she has to elevate people in so many different spaces. I see her, she's constantly, hyping me up in the work that I love to do, which I feel she's focusing on my strengths as an adult. She does it with so many other people. And then really, how do we do this with students? And so I thought that was just a great reminder, and I wanted to just kind of build on what she had to share. I will link down to Rachel's Instagram account. You can see the post directly, because I think it could have a really great conversation. But I also hope that I maybe share some ideas how you can do this with your staff too, because if we want to develop the staff, if we want to develop the strengths of our students, start with your staff. Make them, ensure that they are valued in their work and that they feel every day that what they're really good at is being leveraged to their full capacity. It gives you so much more purpose in what you're trying to achieve, and it makes the hard stuff way easier. If you focus solely on what people aren't good at, and you start from that place, it's not about ignoring weaknesses, it's just starting with strengths. I think that it becomes a way different experience for the adults. Start with their strengths, ensure they feel valued, makes all the difference in the world. So Dr. Rachel, thank you for the inspiration. And all of you, thank you so much. I meant to just do a short podcast. I think I achieved that. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for all you do. Take care.